You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 637, where this is an episode that feels very long overdue, especially given that we were celebrating the 20th anniversary of The Phantom Menace not too long ago, and a character that we've not dedicated a lot of time to on this show, even over the last 15 years, but someone that I think is worthy of talking about finally, and certainly has earned their dues to have a spotlight episode like this. In addition to that, and of course I'm talking about Jar Binks, but in addition to that, today is the official launch date of Jar Jar #1. It's a one-shot comic that's been penned by Ahmed and Marc Guggenheim. We've been talking about it all week. Chris and I have had a chance to read it, and so we thought we'd just couple those two things together, break down the comic, spoil the whole thing. So if you've not read it, or you want to take some time to read it before we watch the show, please do so, because we will spoil everything. So it's going to be all things Jar Jar, and a celebration of a character that has really come around as of recent. But to help me do all that is, of course, Chris. Chris, welcome to the show. How's it going, man?
Hey, going well. I'm excited to talk about this because, like you said, it's a long time coming for this character, and I just can't wait to get into this.
Yeah. It's so weird. Like, Jar Jar comes up, and we've talked about him, from time to time in certain aspects, and and certainly when we were talking about Celebration, or not Celebration, but the Phantom Menace and the 20th anniversary, I remember it did come up there, but we've never really dedicated any time. And I'd like to spend some of this time certainly talking about, the character, the reception, and then again, that's this renaissance that I feel like we're going through at this point. But before we get into all that, I want to say thank you first off to all of our Patreon members, especially our now part of the tribe members. That's Alex, Danny, Dante, Daz. I've got a Brad feeling. Jackson, Jacob, Josh, Mike Borda, Rita Reborn, Sharkman Dan, and Uncle Leon. And then our Delusions of Grandeur tier members. And that is Now This Is Rod Racing, Steve, and Rob. Thank you guys so much. If you're interested in Patreon, you can click the QR code in the corner of this screen here, and sign up for as little as $2 and get a whole back catalog of tons and tons of content that we've done, man, over the course of probably almost coming on 10 years now. So there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of different stuff. So thank you guys for that. This weekend, we will have another Patreon exclusive show coming this Sunday. And want to also remind everybody that Lauren's video for Low Red Moon. So this is the Mike Chen book that's been released just a couple weeks ago. That's out and available for you guys to look, review, watch. She does a full breakdown. It's really great. You'll enjoy it. And trying to think what else we got going on. That's it for now. More stuff to come, though. Okay. Let's get into our main topic, which is talking about Jar Jar and kind of everything. And I thought we'd maybe start at the origin. I don't want this to necessarily be a history lesson in terms of, how the character came about and all that, but I think it is important to understand the context, especially when we're talking about the character as he relates to the reception that he received and Ahmed received back in 1999. Jar Jar was always meant to be, I think Lucas said that he was supposed to be like Goofy, right? That was one of his inspirations, or who he was sort of modeled after. On top of that, he was kind of, the comic relief, not necessarily a foil, although I guess you could consider him to be a foil at times to some characters, but definitely was the comedy character, the lighter character, the character that was created to appease children. And that's where I want to start, because, I at the time that the Phantom Menace came out, I was older. I was in my 20s already at this point, right? And I never really understood the negativity. Like, I understand it. Like, I know the arguments, and I know where those folks came from, but I felt like I had, even at that very young age in my 20s, that I had enough self-awareness to know that this character wasn't for me. This was a character that was created for younger audiences, right? Something to pull younger audiences in, because, outside of, unless you've got flashing lights, loud music, and explosions all the time, I don't know that you're going to capture the attention and the attention span of younger kids. And so you've got to have something in there to kind of break things up and keep things lighter. And that was kind of the origin of the character. And yet I remember walking out of the movie theater in 99 and certainly all the backlash that came with the hate for Jar Jar and how awful he was. And, it was, people even ripping on the technology that was used, which I'm sure we're going to talk about because it was, cutting edge. It really was pioneering the whole motion capture type technology. So I don't know. What was your experience, I guess, Chris, coming out of that, I guess going into the movie with Jar Jar, knowing that he was going to be a character he was already highlighted and we knew he was already going to be in the movie, but then coming out of that, did you have a problem with him? And then what was it like for you in your circles and that kind of that backlash? Was it there? Was it not there? And how did you, I guess, receive that?
So I didn't have a problem with Jar Jar at all. And like you mentioned, we got enough information about the Phantom Menace before the release to realize that his place in this movie was to be, like you said, comic relief and to have something to entertain the kids that were going to come to watch this movie because, there's a lot of talk of trade disputes and stuff. That is not going to keep the interest of a 7, 8, 9-year-old child, right? But a character that acts goofy like most 8, 7, 9-year-old children do is going to definitely keep their interest. So I knew off the top that that's what this character was going to accomplish for this movie. When I saw him for the first time and actually saw the complete movie and what he did in its entirety, I still didn't have an issue with it. I thought this is what he was meant to do. And then also at the end of the movie, I was like, okay, I understand what he was here, right? But I bet you anything, he's going to have a hand to play in the events that lead to the eventual downfall of the Republic. He was kind of like that red herring that at least in my mind, that I knew he was going to do something, and lo and behold, that's what happened. So that's what I had in mind. And again, I didn't mind him whatsoever. Did I think he was was he a little bit over the top? I think yes. So, but it didn't bother me. That's fair. Exactly. Right. I think he was supposed to be over the top. Right. You know what I mean? So I don't have an issue with him. As far as the backlash, what happened, at least in my experience, what happened was folks were unhappy with the movie overall. And whether it was, they did the whole political aspect of it, of, trade routes and whatnot, and, all of that, they just weren't happy with it. They, the Phantom Menace at the time was the most polarizing Star Wars movie by far, right? Obviously, go back to 1999. Where Jar Jar, at least in my opinion, where Jar Jar started to get the hate is that they didn't like the movie, or the certain fans didn't care for the movie, and they really couldn't pinpoint something to blame, so they blamed him. Yeah, that's my experience. I had some folks who, again, he was over the top, he was a little bit silly, and that kind of annoyed some fans. And so, yeah, that's a legitimate gripe. Again, because it didn't bother me, but yeah, it could very well have bothered other fans. But where I saw the most, hate is where they didn't like the movie. They really couldn't pinpoint why they didn't like the movie, so they blamed Jar Jar.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, it was displaced. A lot of it was displaced. A lot of the folks were looking for a scapegoat for not getting what they wanted from Star Wars, right? And we talked about this just recently with the prequel era. So I can see where that is, how that really kind of played out for some folks. And it's unfortunate too, because, again, some of the humor, like you mentioned, it is over the top. Some of it is very dramatic, melodramatic at times. There are, fart jokes, flatulence, right? Stuff that, as an 8-year-old boy, I mean, I was constantly in my armpit making these noises, right? So when you think about it from that perspective, I mean, it was mission accomplished. Now, in your older ages and older years, you don't really want to see that or hear that. But as a kid, I mean, it definitely resonates, and it's certainly something that, kids actually enjoy. I thought you were going to talk in a Jar Jar voice the whole episode. No, I'm sorry. I don't know who started that rumor, but that's not going to happen. But yeah, so like, I totally understand that. And it's unfortunate too, because, Ahmed Best is one of the coolest guys in the world, right? I mean, he's just a genuinely nice person. And he was so young at that time when he was doing that role. He had just come off, I think, what was it? Stomp, I think is what he's doing.
Yep.
On Broadway. and came over and did this. And he's had a successful career since then. But the backlash was something else. Like, I honestly could not believe it. And I really felt bad, not only for the character, but for him as well as an actor, given everything that he'd put into this role. I mean, much of what we see, and I'm going to reiterate this again right now, but much of what we see on screen was pioneered with motion capture. I mean, no one had ever done this before. They spent so much time trying to figure out how all of this was going to work. You know, they didn't have a playbook. They had no one had experience. George Lucas, the actors, not only Ahmed Best as Jar Jar, but all the other characters that had to act around him, right, and look at him, and they would shoot stuff with him on there. They would pull him off and then reshoot it again without him. And I mean, they were just kind of, trying things out, trying to figure out what's going to work, and spending time afterwards in post editing and trying to figure out, okay, now how does this work? And then they go back, and he spent so much time with George Lucas and that team. Who was the other one? Noel, right?
John Noel
was a big part of that as well. And I forget, there was one other person as well, but they spent so much time trying to figure out how to make this thing work. And so when that came out, like, I thought it's brilliant for the time. Like, you really have to put things in perspective. I remember I think it was in Celebration Japan, he came out on one of the stages, and I think he was talking to Kristen Beaver, but he had said that when he came back for Revenge of the Sith, like, it was easy. Like, he was a senator at that point.
Right.
He was surprised at how far in advance some of that technology had already happened in just a 2-3 year span of between those two movies. So we got to keep that in mind, that this was something kind of brand new, evolutionary, revolutionary, if you will. And I really felt bad, because you think about, like, Attack of the Clones. I mean, he really had no presence at all in Attack of the Clones. I mean, he was there, right? We know he was there. By the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, even then, even though he's now in the senator role for Naboo, he's been relegated to what, 2 lines of dialogue, 3 lines of dialogue?
He had no dialogue in Revenge of the Sith.
Okay, maybe it was in part 2 that he had 2.
He had like 3 lines of dialogue that were silly lines in Attack of the Clones. But yeah, the only time we see him in Revenge of the Sith is during the Padme's funeral. Yeah, at the end, and that's it. You just see him walking, and he has no lines.
Yeah, so it's in Attack of the Clones where he he petitions to give emergency powers to Palpatine. So we have that, but yeah, I mean, he had been relegated. And even if you look at the merch, right, there was so much Jar Jar merch that came out with 99 at Phantom Menace. And then by the time you get to Attack of the Clones, it was non-existent. Right. And there was really nothing in Revenge of the Sith outside of like the action figure.
Yeah. That I think that's all he had for, Attack of the Clones was his action figure. Yeah. Like you mentioned, with the Phantom Menace, there was tongue lollipops and shampoo and pool rafts and just ridiculous stuff with Jar Jar slapped over it. But yeah, it was really toned down for Attack of the Clones, and again, 3 or 4 lines of dialogue, and that's about it. So. It was unfortunate. I did kind of feel bad for him, because, just watching him try to pull that character off in the behind the scenes, and, what we've seen since then, you could tell he didn't just show up and like put on the costume and kind of just went up and winged it. He put some thought into it. He did some research. He talked about Goofy and like Groucho Marx and stuff like that. People that he tried to imitate and bring it into this character. So he put a lot of work into it, and then to see it kind of just end literally or figuratively with the Phantom Menace, and then just kind of get bit parts in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. I did feel bad. Did it work story-wise? Yeah, it worked story-wise, but still, I would have enjoyed for him to get some more recognition as that character in those 2 movies.
Yeah. So let's fast forward now. So we're talking post prequel trilogy. There were still moments of Jar Jar. I mean, we still got him. I felt like there was a bit of a renaissance there, at least not necessarily renaissance, but it was certainly showing love for the character by bringing him into several episodes of the Clone Wars.
Yep.
Not always voiced by Ahmed Best. I forget the other gentleman's name. There was another one that came in, but he did contribute to a lot of the episodes there. I was trying to think back on some of those episodes, and it's there's so many Clone War episodes, but The one that stands out is that whole battle on Mon Cala, where he got to swim around. He was in the war itself. I thought that was really cool because he was a Gungan and he could swim underwater and do all that stuff. So, he had those moments in the Clone Wars. And then he really doesn't come up again for a very long time. It's not until we get to the Aftermath series by Chuck Wendig, which there's some really good stuff in that. Especially as the books get, the second and third books are definitely better than the first one. But even just small bits and pieces that we're starting to see come to fruition as canon, now or more recently in the last few years, it's been kind of cool. But there are some things in there that I personally didn't care for. I felt like this one was one of those things that was a slight against him. Now, I have heard other folks say, well, this is kind of, symbolic of where his character, where Ahmed Best's journey has gone, right? And people have been, so bad to him that his, I wouldn't say his career, but he is this comedian, this now street performer, that was some kind of like parallel or mirror image of, how that character went in real life. I don't know. The idea that he was a senator, apparently at some point, by the time we get to Aftermath, which is post Return of the Jedi, he's now a street performer. He befriends this little boy named Mappo, I think. And, they kind of run off and go become street performers together. Like that's going to be his student now. And he's going to take him under his wing and teach him things. And so, it was kind of sad that that's where he ended up, somebody that is a hero of the prequel era, that would be the case. And now it is a book. So I will say that they could eventually change the story. Wouldn't be the first time here recently that they've gone back and changed it, but I don't know. Wasn't the biggest fan of his story or certainly the outcome. But I don't know. What did you think on that one?
Yeah. Full disclosure, I haven't read the entire book. I have read excerpts, and I've read the excerpt that you're talking about. And for me, it's kind of like from a storyline perspective, that the reason why he had fallen so far is his penance for what he did, right?
Right, yeah.
And what he unknowingly did. So from a story perspective, okay, that makes sense. Although I don't, like you, I don't agree with how that character was treated, but it makes sense. It's his penance for essentially opening the door for the birth of the Empire, right?
Right. Giving Palpatine the power, all the power.
Exactly. Now you take yourself out of the story back. Is it a penance for the character itself and the backlash that it received, after the Phantom Menace? Who knows? But I did hear echoes of that was actually something that was considered when that part was written. Which, if it was, that's really disappointing to me.
Yeah,
right. I'm hoping that it's from a story perspective. Again, it's Jar Jar's penance for essentially opening the door for Palpatine to take over. I can live with that, even though I don't agree with it. But if it was just like, hey, we know that a lot of people don't like Jar Jar, we're going to write that he is now essentially a clown, and that's his role for the rest of his life in that universe, so that we can appease the fans that weren't happy with him. That would make me real disappointed because, like it or not, he is a pivotal character in the Star Wars saga. Whether you liked his antics or you didn't like his antics, he is a historical figure, not just in the Star Wars saga, but in movies in general. When I talk to non-Star Wars fans, I hear two names, Darth Vader and Jar Jar Binks. So right. Yeah, he's there. You're not going to get rid of him. But again, if it was a purposefully done to just appease those that didn't like him, I don't think that was a good move.
Yeah. And I think we'll talk about this when we get into the comic breakdown, because I think some of what happens in this comic kind of changes that a little bit, in my opinion. Like it absolves him of that future era in some way. Maybe we'll see. But so we'll come back to that here in a little bit. And then, for the longest time, we really didn't have anything else from Jar Jar, of course, right? He was not, he didn't play a significant role in the sequel trilogy, and a number of years went by. But right around before the 20th anniversary of Celebration of Phantom Menace, right? But going back to Celebration 2019. I should back up. I mean, we should, in full disclosure, we should probably mention too that as a result of that negative feedback and the backlash that was coming, Ahmed Best went through some really dark times, and he was very vocal about it. Like, I remember reading some of the stuff that he posted, I want to say maybe around that same time, 2018, 2019, after it was kind of all past.
Yep.
But it impacted him. It impacted the way he is. I think it impacted his his fatherhood, I guess, or how he saw fatherhood in his son. And I mean, some really, really dark stuff. I mean, I don't want to get into the specifics here, but he's been pretty candid and open about it. I'm sure you can go find articles and interviews where he's talked about it, but he did go through some very dark times. And unfortunately, same thing with, like you think about Jake Lloyd and some of the other actors, and just in Hollywood in general, this is not uncommon, but it is unfortunate that this character went through all of that. And then to see this kind of churning of events, right? By the time we got to like 2018, definitely by 2019, there was this renaissance for Jar Jar Binks and all of the physical work that Ahmed Best did to bring this character to life. And I remember in 2019 when he came out on the celebration stage for that Phantom Menace panel, that standing ovation went on forever. Like it was just something that I had always hoped we would see, but really never thought that we would ever see. I never thought he would get his proverbial flowers in the manner in which he did. It was very emotional, very moving. I wasn't there on the floor for that panel, unfortunately. I think we were doing something else, but did you get a chance to see that one there? Yeah. What was that like?
I was there. I was front row. Actually, no, I was second row. I was actually sitting behind Dan Mattson. If everyone should know who Dan Mattson is. He is essentially the guy that created the Star Wars Insider, as well as the father of Celebration. If it wasn't for this guy, we would not have Star Wars Celebration. So I was sitting behind him at that panel, and the standing ovation he got, it was an emotional thing because I being a fan and following him, I understood. I knew the dark, tough times he had just gone through, and how open he was about it, and it seemed like everyone in that auditorium knew it as well. Yeah. And it's kind of like when he came out, and it people stood up immediately, clapping very hard, yelling very hard, and not yelling words and not yelling anything negative, yelling words of encouragement, like the "we love you" and "you're the best" type of encouragement, being yelled at him as he's on stage. He had to wave like 2 or 3 times, and people were still, on their feet, clapping, yelling at him, all the positive things. It was very touching to see and very well deserved. I think if it wasn't for that character and the way he portrayed that character, a lot of the CG characters that we have today probably wouldn't be the way they are, because he essentially was the one that pioneered, along with the other, VFX technicians at like ILM and whatnot, the whole stop motion capture thing to try to bring the actor's performance into something that's essentially not there, something that's going to be added in post after the fact. He helped bring that into the movie making process. So people who love those kind of movies are really indebted to him. And I think everyone realized that. I think people softened on the character. It's like, as you get older, like I was in my early 20s when I saw The Phantom Menace. And I know a lot of the people that I saw it with, a lot of my crew at the time, they were in their, late teens, early 20s. And, you have a very cynical view of life at that point. And things that aren't serious or don't really appeal to you, you kind of don't take seriously. But as you get older, that's kind of softens, and you tend to look back on things a little bit differently. And I think that's what kind of happened. Not to mention the kids that grew up with the prequel trilogy as their Star Wars, they loved Jar Jar, so they never stopped loving him. It was just the loudmouth adults at the time that had an issue. They were the ones that were fanning the fires of, hey, Jar Jar is bad. But combine all that together, combine how he was very passionate in sharing his story at the time, I think that's what turned the tide on the character. Now, I haven't heard in a long time anything negative about Jar Jar Binks, about Ahmed Best. If anything, everything has been positive. So that's a good thing. Because like I said, Jar Jar, whether you like him or not, he is a legendary Star Wars character, and he always will be.
Yep. Yeah, and let's keep in mind too, 2019, that was the first celebration that he attended. Like, he had never been to any of the celebrations.
He was at Celebration, the first one.
Oh, was he?
Yes, he was at the first one. And
I
the
remember.
reason, Just a quick story about him. He came and he did a panel with Ray Park, and they were going to, it was mainly Ahmed, but there was going to be an after celebration party called Jar Jam, where he was actually going to jam out because, he is a musician.
Right.
He was going to jam out with some other musicians, and it was supposed to be a good time. And that thing sold out like really quick, and I didn't have an opportunity to get tickets. And so at the end of that particular panel, he was like, "Oh, who's going to the Jar Jam?" And, a lot of people said, "Whoo!" And then someone said, "Oh, I couldn't get tickets." And then as one person said it, like a lot of people said it, and he looked at everyone and he was like, "I am so sorry." He goes, "I wish I could fit more people into the venue. I wish I could do another show." He was genuinely sorry. I mean, he was holding his chest. He wanted everyone who wanted to attend to have an opportunity to attend. And I feel like, I was there, and I feel like that he generally wanted that. So from that point on, I was a fan. But he has a good heart. And I think, having a good heart can work to your advantage, but it can also kind of soften you a little bit whenever you receive like harsh criticism. And I know the excuse has always been, "Oh, it's nothing personal against Ahmed. It's against the character." But these are Ahmed's words. Like, if you attack that character that I'm playing, you're attacking me.
Yeah,
and that's true. And I think that having a big heart like that, it kind of got to him. But I'm just very happy to see the tables have turned for the better for him, and now Jar Jar gets the respect that he deserves from Star Wars fans.
Yeah. And just the final point on that I want to make too was that I think he, in that one of the 2019 interviews, it wasn't the panel, the Phantom Menace panel, but afterwards he came back out and he was there and did an interview again on stage, and he mentioned that George Lucas told him, because I asked him like, are you surprised about the love that you're getting here at Celebration? This is in 2019 again. And he said no, because he said, this is exactly what George Lucas told me would happen, right? That all these kids would grow up and they don't know anything about the feedback. They don't know anything about the negative. They didn't know anything about the negativity that was going on at the time. All they knew is that was a character from their childhood memories that they grew up with. And now those kids, are in their 20s and some even in their 30s at this point, right? So he said George Lucas was right all along. And this is the same thing we've said for so many years about different things in Star Wars, certain aspects of Star Wars, the prequel trilogy, the sequel trilogy in particular, that those movies will be loved by fans in 15, 20 years. I mean, they're loved now by folks, but it's not as bad as everybody wants you to think they are, because, things come around like that. But anyways, I digress on some of that. But all right. So, this kind of really all plays into this resurgence of things. And we'd be remiss without mentioning that the character of Kelleran Beq is also in the comic that we're going to talk about tonight. This is a character that was created for Jedi Temple Challenge, which was a video, like a game show that came out right around COVID, right before COVID, if I remember correctly. And he did a great job with that. And one of the coolest things was when they approached him and said, "Hey, would you want to do this?" He said yes, that he wanted to, because he had always, being a teacher was something he looked up to. He looked up to teachers, and he created this. They allowed him to create his own backstory, right? Kelleran Beq's backstory was all created by Ahmed Best. Everything from the lightsaber they used and the name and, who he was, his upbringing, all the backstory of it all. So he came up with all that. And it was such a popular character. I mean, the show was really cool. It's unfortunate that COVID happened, because they never did another season from it, but I remember watching that and enjoying it. I thought this is kind of cool. And it was really neat just to see Ahmed Best back in Star Wars. And, he'd already done, Jar Jar. He had a couple bit roles, and I think he was a off character, like a bar patron or something in Attack of the Clones and some other stuff. Right. So, I mean, he had those little roles here and there, but this was an actual character, a Jedi character, no less, brought to life by him for this game show. And it was just really special to watch those episodes. I thought they were a lot of fun.
Yeah, I only caught one or two. The best way that I could describe it, it's like if you had the old kid game show Double Dare, but added like Force elements to it. It was interesting. Like unfortunately, I didn't catch a lot of it when it was out there. I hopefully I'll have an opportunity to check it out later. But I heard a lot of good things. But the big thing that I heard coming out of that show is the character of Master Beq. I think with that character, and then seeing where it went from that particular show
to the Mandalorian,
exactly, to the Jedi Master that is actually the one that saves Grogu from the massacre at the temple.
Right.
That is that's just total. I think for Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau to give that opportunity to Ahmed Best, I'll always have those two in high regards, because if anyone in Star Wars, if any actor or anyone in Star Wars deserves a reprise and an opportunity to come back and play in the galaxy far, far away, it would be Ahmed Best.
Yeah. Yeah. They did him right by doing that. And there was such a resurgence. I mean, I don't know how many videos people were posting. I mean, I was so excited to see him on screen when he appeared. He was a total surprise for us. He was talked about for days and weeks on end beyond once that episode aired. But yeah, talk about a cool redemption for Ahmed Best personally to
exactly.
Have that. And that kind of leads us right into where we are today, where we've kind of taken these two characters, both played by Ahmed Best. They've now put a comic book together. He's writing this comic book with Marc Guggenheim. It's been talked about for a while. Wasn't sure how they were going to do this and the story behind it all, but the fact that he was behind some of the writing here, I love that idea. I loved these two characters. There's a moment in the comic book that we'll talk about where they almost say that, hey, they're one and the same character. They're kind of playing tongue in cheek with the dialogue, right? Knowing that it's Ahmed Best behind both of the characters, but they did a really good job with this. So any final thoughts or anything about Jar Jar, the character himself, before we get into the comic breakdown?
No, really, we've kind of talked about, the whole rise, fall, and rise again of Jar Jar Binks. And I'm just happy, like I said previously, that now at least from the temperature in Star Wars fandom, it's kind of cool to the whole the Jar Jar Binks character to where now he's kind of where he should be in Star Wars character hierarchy. Again, just someone who is a legendary character in that series.
Yeah. Okay, so at this point on, we're going to spoil everything, so you can stop now. If you've not read the comic, I'd recommend doing so, and go pick it up, go read it, and then come back and you can hit play or hit pause or whatever, unpause if you're listening to the podcast. So, first off, I want to say thank you to Marvel Comics. Huge thank you to Marvel Comics for allowing us to have this issue and all the other issues beforehand. So we've had a chance. We got this on Monday. We've had a chance to read it a few times. Chris and I were kind of talking back and forth about it, and. So thank you guys for everyone at Marvel for allowing us to have this preview. So this is a one-shot comic, meaning they're technically only obligated to do one issue, but that's not always the case, right? Marvel and DC will always solicit something as a one-shot, and then if it does really well, guess what? They're like, oh, we're going to start a series, or we're going to do another one-shot, right? So I'm not saying there aren't legs here that this could live on, but at least for right now, by the book, this is a one and done. So I mentioned who this was written by. It's drawn by Kieran McCohen and Laura Braga. And this takes place somewhere around 22 BBY. So almost immediately after Palpatine has the emergency powers that are bestowed upon him from the infamous Jar Jar Binks speaking up and calling a vote to grant him emergency powers. So so that's the setup. Let me share my screen because I do have a couple of screenshots that I want to share just to kind of help the story flow along here a little bit. And this is the cover here. There's a couple covers. There's the alternate cover that I use for the key art for our show tonight. And then they've got a Black History Month, which is a really cool cover. Like I want to get my hands on that one, but it's got all the Black characters from Star Wars, most of them. And it looks like it's a wraparound, but I could be wrong on that. But I don't have the artists and all that to show, but there are 3 covers for this one. The beginning of this comic, to kind of set everything up, says, once seen as an outcast from his underwater home among the Gungans, Jar Jar Binks redeemed himself by showing his bravery during the Battle of Naboo. Since then, he has become a representative of Naboo in the Galactic Senate. Recently, he proposed the idea of giving expanded powers to Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, but he's about to discover that actions have consequences. So that's the setup there again for it. And we kind of open up. We open up here. Let me go to the actual panels here. There's Rick Olay or Oli or however you say his name.
Rick Ollie.
Rick Ollie, the character that was like the very first action figure. And I went and bought it and thought, oh my gosh, I have the first character and he's going to be a huge character and have a massive role. And you too?
Yeah, I thought he was going to be like the Han Solo. The way that they hyped him up before the Phantom, I thought it was going to be like sort of the high Han Solo type of character, and he just was just the pilot.
Just the pilot.
He was just a pilot.
But I do like the fact that so we start on this ship called the Hey Blibber Duck, which is Jar Jar's personal ship. It's a Nabooian ship. I'll show you. I've got a picture of it here in a little bit, but he's in there with now Commander Rick Ollie, and they are heading to a planet called Urabai so that Jar Jar can meet up with this ambassador by the name of Ambassador Upsina, right? And that's kind of where they're headed. So Jar Jar and they get to Quarant City, which is the main city of this planet. It looks like a Coruscant, but you can see the mountains in the background, but it's a very dense industrial at times, very populated kind of city area. So something we've seen before, very familiar with in Star Wars. Jar Jar refuses help from once they land on the planet or on the city. Rick's like, hey, why don't I come with you? Why don't I help you get to where you need to be? And he's like, no, I've got it. I'm going to use it. He's got a device that he's got, and he's going to use that device to get down to where this ambassador is. Of course, it's Jar Jar Binks, and it's bad things happen to good people, and he certainly gets lost within the first couple minutes of whatever. He gets lost, doesn't know where he's at. The device stops, and the reason why is because the device stops working, and we'll talk about that as to why that device stops working a little bit later. But the device stops working, he gets lost, and of course, he's approached by some friendly people like this gentleman here, who comes up and is like, hey, where are you going? Oh, I can help you, sort of thing. Takes him out into like some dark alley area. Then pulls a blaster on him and holds him at ransom and says, look, I need you to give me all your money and everything else. And Jar Jar is like, hey, I'm a senator, right? You got the wrong person. And he's like, no, I know exactly who you are. I mean, he sticks out like a sore thumb in this, in the city itself. So this is just more speaking to Jar Jar's lack of street sense more than anything, that he would, get himself in this kind of position here. And I'll pause after this because I want your thoughts. While he's right when this happens, immediately this burglar guy or this thief realizes there's something behind Jar Jar and is like really spooked, really freaked out. He drops the blaster and then just kind of runs off. And Jar Jar is surprised too. He's not really sure why suddenly he was being held at blaster, and then suddenly this guy just books it. And it's of course because Master Kelleran Beq has now shown up. He's shown up in. Jar Jar sees him. He knows who he is. He refers to him as the Sabered Hand, which was the name that was given to him. I don't know if that name was given to him, that moniker was given to him in Jedi Temple Challenge, or if that was something that came as a result of The Mandalorian. I'm not really sure where that originated.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I want to say it was something that was made up in the backstory after the Jedi Temple Challenge for The Mandalorian, but I'm not sure. I knew that was a reference to him, but I don't know where it originated from.
Yeah. I love the name though. The Sabered Hand of all people, right? And he's supposed to be like an incredible, lightsaber combatant, up there with like the Mace Windu's, if you will, in terms of his prowess. But so he shows up and basically says, hey, Jar Jar, Jar Jar tells him, I'm looking for this ambassador Upsina, and Kelleran Beq says, well, that's actually me. I created that name because I needed to get you down here so that you could see some things that are going on that are kind of, blow your mind, so to speak. So let me pause there. Do you have any notes or anything that you want to talk about before we get into what he shows Jar Jar?
So the only thing I could say is that these first 2 pages of this comic, I think it's the first time I've laughed at reading a comic book in a long time.
Oh, wow.
Because some of the antics in these first 2 pages are like, yeah, that's typical Jar Jar. And it kind of, it played on Jar Jar's like lack of common sense and like that childlike, whimsical attitude that he has, and how he got taken advantage of. But then his words, it just took me back to some of the stuff that he said in Phantom Menace that was funny. So yeah, I actually let out some good, oral, chuckles reading a couple of these 2 pages here.
And again, we're not going to cover everything in the comic, so because we definitely this is one that I'll recommend, and we'll talk more about that here in a second. So we're not covering everything, but know that this character, the way it's written, whether it was Best or Guggenheim or the combination thereof, they certainly nailed all the antics and the dialogue, and I mean everything about it, even in this stupid ship name, that he came up with, the whatever it was, hillbilly
Hey Blibber Duck.
Hey Blibber Duck. I call it the Duck now throughout the rest of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what they refer to it from that point on. But the Hey Blibber Duck. and they'll say that again later when he's like, oh my God. But that was one of the things that made me laugh, because I didn't expect that whatsoever. I thought the Hey Blibber was just going to be a reference to what he did back in the the Phantom Menace, and then I would never going to hear it again. And then here it is, and then attached to Duck. And then and have it be the name of this real sleek looking starship. That just made me laugh.
All right, so Beq takes Jar Jar. They go to I think I have the next picture here. They go to this area here, and he basically tells them that there are people that he calls the Unseen, which is the name of the comic, by the way. The name of this issue is called Unseen. And essentially shows them that there's a ton of slaves on this planet that are being forced to mine for coaxium, and they've been banished by the Yoruba government, right? The government themselves have pushed these people out and forced them to go work and mine coaxium. And he tells them that the reason why the government is allowing this to happen and for these folks to essentially be treated as slaves is because they are working with Palpatine, who just recently got, guess what, all the emergency powers in the galaxy. And so I think there's certainly profits to be made here by the government and their willingness to just allow people to be used as slave work to mine that coaxium. But at the same time, you've got Palpatine who's saying, look, we need this coaxium because we're at war and we need to fuel our ships. But there's something not right here, right? Kelleran Beq feels like they're over mining the amount of, and I think it's another character. I'll come back to that in a second, but there is a sense that they're going too far, too much, too deep, almost literally and figuratively in their mining efforts. And when I read that, I thought, okay, well, this is probably more of, they're going to need coaxium to fuel the Death Star, right? They're going to need a lot of fuel for the Death Star, the Imperial Star Destroyers that they want to build at some point, right? So that's what's throwing people off. It's just a little too much. So they're doing too much digging here during this time. So they're exporting massive quantities of this coaxium over to the Galactic Republic. It sounds very, and as I'm reading this, it was very reminiscent of like Gorman from Andor and like what was happening on the planet of Gorman. And they do kind of explain also when Jar Jar's little sensor, little navigator thing that he was using to get down to that ambassador, the reason why that went out is because as a result of all this mining, they've had like power outages and certain devices and electronics or whatever aren't working. They falter at times. And this is all leading to, again, very similar to what Gorman was like. This planet is becoming very, very unstable very quickly. And it's only a matter of time before, it just blows up or something terrible is going to happen. And of course, Jar Jar feels hugely responsible for all of this now. There's parts in here where his eyes are massively wide open. The realization sets in that, oh my gosh, I'm the direct result of the origin of why, not only is the Galactic Empire taking all this stuff, and although they weren't called that at this time, but not only are they overmining and doing all these things, but they are reluctantly taking care of their people. They don't even care about their people anymore. They just send them to the mines to go do Palpatine's work.
Yeah, and one thing I want to touch on is the remorse that he had. I mean, in one of the panels, he has his hands buried in his face, saying, this is Misa fault. He is really touched by seeing this, and it comes from where he comes from. On Naboo, the Gungans, while they weren't necessarily slaves, they were looked down upon.
Right.
And at least that was the idea that they had, and so he kind of. These unseen workers here, again, just out there, working to mine this coaxium without regards to, their well-being and whatnot, essentially being unseen. That's how he felt being a Gungan and being unseen by the Naboo, are seen as something less than what they were. So I believe what they were trying to capture is that he feels this, and that's why he feels a call to action to try to help him.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. It's not only just a responsibility, but he sees himself in some of these workers and being unseen in that regard. So from this point, he then introduces, Kelleran Beq introduces Jar Jar to this character named Coralisa Seneg. And Coralisa is, kind of like the main contact. She takes care of the families, the miners, the people, that sort of thing. So she's almost kind of like that, servant type worker or service worker, if you will, for these folks. And she brings up a kind of an interesting point here, that there is something else that's being mined that they found in these mines. It's very rare. It's a massively rare resource that's out there, and they call it cypheristal. And I maybe have that wrong. I don't know how you pronounced it, but it's a combination of like cipher and crystal. And it's a special crystal that grows within this planet here, but it's also the basis of a technology called the fractal radio. Now, fractal radio, if you've been paying attention to Star Wars here recently, that radio, fractal radio, was actually used in Andor. So this was the radio that Kleya was using to speak and to all the different rebels and all the people that were out there in these different sects, at least everybody that was under, what was his name now? I'm trying to think of his name. But
Luthen.
Luthen, yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is the same radio that we saw. And if you remember in Andor, she had that dial. They would pull that drawer out, and then there was a dial there, and she had to listen in and stuff. That was the fractal radio that they were using. So it's very cool that they tied this thing, the crystals, to that. And there's probably even a bigger connection to that, which we'll come back to here in just 1 minute. But Beq then explains that he implies that, look, if we get our hands on these crystals, we could actually build this fractal radio and use it to communicate with each other and do good work without the Empire ever knowing, right? It's kind of their secret communications equipment or service or whatever else, right? So they're kind of thinking ahead of like, hey, this doesn't seem like it's going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. And we need a way to stay in communication with each other. So we need to take advantage of the fact that that this mineral exists and take it before the Empire gets their hands on it, kind of thing. Right. So that sounds all great and fine, but they've also got a bigger problem as well. So I'll pause there. Do you have any comments on that before I move into the next section here?
No, it's the only thing I want to say is that this was a connection, like you said, that I didn't expect. A connection to Andor, and the fractal radio that was used there. I did not expect that. So that was a real big surprise for me, and a good one, because I know a lot of folks are like, hey, we don't have to tie all these stories together, but when you do, and it actually works.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I think they hit it really good on this one.
Yep. So they go back to kind of like this, I don't know, I guess it's their base. It wasn't really clear as to where they were, but they go back to this area here, and you were introduced to this character. Now, we're not given the name of this character just yet, but we're told that she is one of the people that's working on building this fractal radio. And the unfortunate thing is that the Empire has gotten word or gotten ear that they are trying to do something with building this fractal radio. What's that?
Actually, let's get a little bit more specific. Chancellor Palpatine knows that they're trying to build this fractal radio.
Yeah.
And that is the issue there. Yeah.
Yeah. And that gets revealed, I think, at the very end. It's kind of a surprise to Jar Jar when he does say that. But on top of that, as you can read here, they've got now 2 bounty hunters that are coming after her, which, is a big problem because she's the only one that can kind of do this, right? They kind of play it up as though she's the one that can create this, and without her, they may not be able to build this hypothetical fractal radio kind of thing. So they decide, okay, well, look, we got to get off the planet. If their bounty hunters come in, let's get out of here. Let's get her to Coruscant where she can be safe. And you can see all 4 of them decide to take off. And there's the ship right there, the Duck, if you will. And they're about to actually get away when suddenly, these 2 bozos show up. So you've got Rumsleg and Aura Singh. So both of these characters were So Aura Singh, well, maybe not, maybe we do, but we all know her from The Phantom Menace, and a character that was supposed to be, played out as a bigger character later on, only had that one bit piece. And then she came back in the Clone Wars and had a whole bunch of episodes, and there's been comics and everything else, but a very cool character design that they've gone back and now given her, fleshed her out and really done some really cool stuff. Rum Slag was another character that showed up. I think it was The Phantom Menace, but he was kind of like a character just off in the background. And eventually he was turned into like a bounty hunter. They kind of gave him that name and did a backstory at some point. But either way, it's a cool character design. I mean, it just looks like a dude in a diving suit with, a skull mask on of sorts. So, but anyways, these two bounty hunters show up. They open fire on all four of these guys. Of course, Kelleran Beq does his best to kind of deflect bolts here and there. And he tells everybody, get to the ship, we got to get out of here kind of thing. And unfortunately, she takes you can see it right down there on her knee. She takes a blaster bolt there. What was her name? Coralisa. Our faces are covering up Kelleran Beq's screaming Coralisa down here. You can't really see it, but he's screaming it right there. So, it's surprising that he has this kind of a reaction. I don't think there's anything in that, honestly, but I was surprised just how powerful these panels were. And then I started thinking, well, does he have a relationship with her? Because that wouldn't be different than we've seen from other stuff, especially when you're talking about the High Republic. But I don't know. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole or conspiracy theory as to why. But he's definitely concerned because he's a Jedi and one of his people just got hit, and she goes down. He goes over to tend to her, tries to tell her to get up and get her going, but she's like, no. She does the very proverbial thing of like, no, this is you guys got to go on. I'm fine. I'll figure it out. Get out of here. Get the other person. I think she actually says her name, which I'm not going to give it away just yet, but she says, you got to get her to safety. And so with that, he leaves her, jumps into the ship. And while he's on the ship, they are then attacked. So Aura Singh manages to jump onto the ship. She gets in there. You can see where they're kind of fighting each other here. He's doing his best to keep her at bay. On top of all that, Slag is now in a ship out in space as well, and he's taking fire. He's shooting onto the Duck ship as well. So you've got these kind of two battles that are going on simultaneously. All the while, they're trying to make that jump into light speed, hyperspace to kind of get away. So I know that there's a lot there, but anything you want to add to that before we kind of talk about, I guess, the final steps here?
No, this was actually a pretty action-packed couple of panels here in this comic, and I thought, it happened. The timing of it was perfect, and it was very reminiscent to the first Tatooine encounter between Qui-Gon and Darth Maul, where they encounter each other, and then they have to make this quick getaway. Yeah, and instead of Qui-Gon was able to jump on the platform and then be brought into the ship. It was Aura Singh, without them knowing, was able to grab onto the platform and then sneak onto the ship to try to collect her bounty, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've said this before when we've broken comics down on this show. We don't like it. I can't get up here and talk about the action without showing every panel. Like, it doesn't make any sense for me to talk about the action and what's going on. Just, it doesn't do it justice. You got to get the comic to read it and to see it. So to experience it, if you will. So while this is all going on, like I said, they're trying to make the jump to hyperspace. Rick Olay is in there. Of course, he's in there. But when I mentioned that Slag kind of takes a shot at the Duck, you can see it here. It hits the ship, and unfortunately that knocks him unconscious. And so now it's all up to Jar Jar, right? He's the only one driving the ship. You've got the other character. I'll just say her name now, Mira. The other character is in there, but she's not, I guess, not a pilot or whatever. And so it's all up to Jar Jar. So, they're really playing up this whole thing of like, get us out of here. We got to hit the jump. Kelleran Beq is able to take Aura Singh out. He uses the Force to kind of push her up into a wall, knocking her unconscious. He has a cool, he says sleep right here. I have it cut out, but he says sleep, which I thought was kind of cool. Because I was like, oh, what was he going to do? Like some force power that puts her to sleep? And it's like, no, he just slams her head into a wall or something and knocks her out, which, I guess is a way to put her to sleep. But
if I could add to this, the reason why, and I thought this was actually a very cool couple of panels here, because, what happens is that, the Duck is taking fire, and as it's taking fire, everyone's being thrown around in the interior of the ship. And what happens is the last time it takes fire, essentially, Aurra Sing has the advantage against him, and lifts her blaster and says die, and then that's when Beq essentially says sleep and pushes her against the wall and knocks her out. So I thought that was a cool little exchange right there, where she was like, die, and he's like sleep, and then boom, throws her against the wall. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So she goes unconscious, and then Jar Jar finally takes control of the ship, and there's her head getting smashed into the wall there, or whatever it is. He says, Jar Jar, get us out of here. And of course, he, flips switches and does whatever he does. I love that he's got Issa working here, because it reminded me of Anakin when he got the pod racer working again. It's working. Issa working. But of course, they make the jump to light speed. So they end up going to Coruscant. They land on Coruscant, and then we finally get the big reveal as Jar Jar saying goodbye to Mira. And it turns out, she says, it's Mira. She says her name. I think he says, like, I didn't even catch your name. She says, it's Mira Bridger. So this is Ezra's mother. Of course, before she, gets married to Ephraim, and of course, before they have Ezra. So this kind of changes things. First off, like, as a Star Wars Rebels fan, like, I was blown away. And you'd read it before I did. I didn't get a chance to read it before you. And you had already texted me like, have you read it yet? And I'm like, no. Okay. And I'm like, why is he asking me? And then you asked me again. You're like, did you read it yet? And I'm like, no, not yet. And you're like, okay, there's something. I think you mentioned there's like some surprise character there. And I was like, oh, really? I didn't realize that. But when I read it, I texted you immediately and I was like, whoa, like this is big. That because, and it may not seem big, honestly, but so many times in comics, we don't get like material things that really can change how we have seen things play out over the years. And this is one of them, because we don't have a lot of information on Mira Bridger, honestly. I mean, we see her in Rebels, of course. It's mostly through flashbacks and, Ezra talking about his parents and how much they loved him. We know that they were critical and crucial in standing up against the Empire, right? All of Lothal was. And they were they did this by communicating to people of Lothal and whoever was listening in the galaxy that, hey, the Empire is corrupt. They are oppressive, and they're fascist and horrible and blah blah, all the stuff. But this kind of implies that now that we know that she was kind of one of the creators, if not the originator of the fractal radio, you could imply, and I don't know if this is what they were trying to do or not, but it could be implied that the way they were communicating and the way that, and this communication went on, like if you remember later on, Ezra gives, I think it's in season 1 towards the very end, he kind of gives out this like massive, like, hey, we're all here and the Empire is bad. He's doing it for his family. I think if I remember the episode correctly, he's trying to live and follow in the footsteps of his parents, and his parents actually hear him broadcast this message. And they're able to kind of, when they hear the message, they're like, oh my God, it's Ezra Bridger. It's got to be him. He's speaking just like us, et cetera, et cetera. But his parents were imprisoned at this time. The Empire finally caught up with them. But it could be implied that the way Ezra was communicating, and at least maybe some of the communication that was happening through Fulcrum and other things, was because of the fractal radio. So not only does it tie directly into Andor, but some of those origins may actually originate here in Star Wars Rebels timeline. So that's significant in the sense that what we knew of Mira prior to this comic was really nothing. Like, I thought she was just an average citizen that decided to stand up against the Empire, had influence and was successful in doing so. But I love this another dimension that they gave to her as being this really highly intelligent and creator of something that later on would benefit the Rebel Alliance all the way up into Andor to become successful against the the oppressive Galactic Empire.
Yeah, and I like the fact that again, you want comics to have their own story, right? When you're talking about comics and novels that tie into like visual media, like movies and TV show, you do want them to have their own story. But I think when you can do that and then tie into the quote visual media to give characters that you learn about in that visual media, give them a little bit more backstory, I think that's when the comics really excel. And that's what it did here. Again, like I thought Mira and Ephraim Bridger, they were just people that decided to take a stand. Like anyone anywhere could take a stand against tyranny and oppression and whatnot. I thought that's all they were. But now we see Ezra's mother in a new light, thanks to this comic. Now I'm curious, okay, are we going to have the same thing down the line in another comic book or novel talking about Ephraim and his ties to how he became an advocate against the Empire? So I'm really curious to see. But again, I think this comic did a lot of things well as far as tying into the visual media that's available for Star Wars. We talked about the fractal radio and how it ties into Andor. Here, obviously, it fleshes out a little bit of a character that was introduced in Star Wars Rebels. Then they say, they don't imply it specifically, but they use the term the network. And that's another aspect that ties into a visual media of Star Wars in Obi-Wan Kenobi, because that's how the fragments of the rebellion were able to locate surviving Jedi, through that network. Now, did it use the radio like we saw in Rebels, we see here, or not in Rebels, but in Andor, and how we see it potentially, being set up to be used out of this comic book? I'm not sure, but they use that term. So one can say that was also vital in that communication, trying to find the Jedi as the rebellion was trying to get its feet. So again, I really loved how this comic not only was able to tell a story about Jar Jar, about Master Beq, but also have those tie-ins to other things that we've already seen.
Yeah, it's all one and the same. Like all these pieces have to, they're cogs in a larger wheel or device, if you will. The network, the fractal radio, the rescuing, the communication, the uprising, all of these pieces had to go into play, and everything that Andor gave us. I mean, there's so many pieces in there too, where one thing doesn't happen in Andor and we never get the Rebel Alliance, and so it does add a lot of weight, a lot of dimension to her character, and super excited and appreciative that they actually did this. So, but that's not it. So Beq takes her, and we're almost at the end here, but Beq takes her into hiding. He's going to go keep her and do something with her, to keep her away from the Empire. And then we get this moment where Jar Jar Binks then heads to Senator Palpatine. He goes into his office. He explains that, look, the planet is being overmined, and it's in danger of being collapsing. Palpatine says, well, look, we really need the coaxium, and we're doing good work here. And, he's selling it as best he can. Let me advance the screen here too, because you don't want to look at her, but you can see them here. And Jar Jar reminds him that, look, I'm the one that gave you the powers that you have today. And so he kind of almost insists that, hey, you should really help out the people of Robai for what's going on there. And it's really funny. Like, this is really an aside, and I don't know if they really went this deep with this, but if you remember during was it Revenge of the Sith? I think there was a scene that was cut out where Palpatine calls Jar Jar Binks into his office, similar, almost the same exact setting that we've got here. And he wants to thank Jar Jar for giving him those powers. And it's very interesting that scene got cut out. I think there's, I remember Lucas said that, I don't remember the reason why it was cut out, but they never filmed it and never really made it into the final script. But it is cool that we've got almost kind of like this, it's not a parallel, but it's definitely the adverse of this, right? You've got Binks coming in and saying, look, I gave you the power, and now I need you to do something good with it, right? Return the favor for what I did for you. And so Palpatine, kind of commits to like, okay, yeah, you're right. If the planet's unstable, you're right. It's, it could blow up and then we wouldn't have any coaxium kind of thing. And some of this is really, Jar Jar is coming from this as like, hey, you need to not let the planet blow up, because in actuality, they need the crystals, right, to build the fractal radio. And this is where Palpatine drops the bomb on him and says, hey, I'll ensure that the mine keeps going, and that we can mine the cipher crystal, which is that cipher crystal as well. And you can see the look here after he says that to him. He's got a smirk on his face, and this is that reveal of Palpatine's been aware that they've been doing this, right? Like, he knows that they've actually been doing this, which all makes sense now, especially given that the bounty hunters were sent out after Mira. So and then Palpatine, kind of, so they all agree that they're going to, keep things safe. He's going to do better with the workers. I assume he does. We don't ever get any kind of like, committal or confirmation that actually is what happens. But you get the sense that with Jar Jar, he's probably going to make sure and hold him accountable and see that he does. And honestly, I don't see why Palpatine wouldn't. All right. I mean, it's in his own best interest to ensure that doesn't happen, that the planet doesn't blow up and that mining can continue. If he's got to, spend a little bit more money to make their conditions better or whatever, then I think he's fine doing all that, right? At least right now, especially earlier on in his infancy as Supreme Chancellor. But I'll get your thoughts here in just a second. But Palpatine then goes in and he mentions that, I see a lot of you in Kelleran Beq, and I see a lot of Kelleran Beq inside of you. Like you guys are kind of one and the same, right? And it's of course tongue in cheek that the writers did here to kind of let us, we're all in on the joke here that these guys are the same. But then the real big kicker is when he mentions to Jar Jar that he knows that they saved Mira Bridger and calls her out by name.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, so not only did he know what she was, but he knew who she was, what she was doing. So yeah, I mean, the Bridgers have been on the radar of Palpatine for a long, long time, much longer than we thought based on what we get to in Star Wars Rebels.
Yeah. And I really like the way that these couple pages documenting the interaction between Jar Jar and Palpatine went. And it just really, for me, it showed again the emotional impact of Jar Jar's choice back in Attack of the Clones to give Palpatine the emergency powers that kind of led to this. Again, earlier in the comic, he was like, this is Misa's fault. He was really felt bad. But another thing that I really loved about these couple pages here, it just showed how sinister Palpatine is. There was in one of the first panels, or actually the first panel of them being together in his office. He was like, I always have time for my favorite delegate who's done so much for me. I can see Ian McDermott, I can hear him mouthing those words. I mean, and he was just really pandering to Jar Jar. And then you see it at the finale of their conversation where he, essentially lets Jar Jar know he knows of Mira Bridger and what they're doing. And he has like this half stunned, half scared look on his face, like, you knew about that, and he's like, yeah, I'm the Supreme Chancellor, I know all of this. And so it kind of leads into the conversation that kind of ties the whole comic up in a nice little bow.
It's good. And you're right. Like we haven't highlighted or maybe talked about it enough, but the dialogue is so good in this. Like every character is like spot on. Like, sometimes you read novels and comics and you're like, okay, they wouldn't say that, or they wouldn't speak this way, or that's not the right tone, or not part of it seems out of character for them to do things or say things. And like everything was done like brilliantly in terms of, staying in character and what we would expect from these characters.
I'm sorry. Really, like I said, I really did like these last couple pages. And I mentioned that I could hear Ian McDermott, saying the words out of the comic book that Palpatine was saying. Another thing, once I read it for the first time and I was kind of done reading it, I actually could play in my head that scene, with Ahmed Best as Jar Jar and Ian McDermott as Chancellor Palpatine actually having that conversation, and the dialogue was spot on, So yeah, the writers did an excellent job with the dialogue here. The characters that we knew, they got their mannerisms, they got how they spoke and how they reacted to their characters. They got it all right.
Yep. All right, we get let's wrap it up. And this comic ends with Kelleran Beq and Jar Jar on Coruscant. They're out on this bridge, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, if you will. But Binks, he gives them the updates on what happened with Palpatine. Beq tells him that he's going to be his eyes and ears. He's going to be Jar Jar Binks' eyes and ears on Urabai. And he says, and then Jar Jar responds, and I'm going to screw this up, but he says, sometimes Yusa have to remember where Yusa been to see where Yusa going, and Misa see now. So going back to what we said at the very beginning about the unseen and him seeing himself in people, or himself seeing himself in the slaves or the people of Urabai. This is really what prompted him to kind of step up and do the right thing here, right? Make the good call for those people. And now, also he tells Beq that he thinks that Palpatine is up to something very big. He's got some suspicion. He's spooked about that whole conversation that he just had with Palpatine. So he's alluding to something bigger going on, which of course can be a number of things, least of which is probably, or most of which is the Death Star, and says that, and Kelleran Beq says, well, if that's right, if he really is up to something, then that fractal radio network needs to be built immediately, like ASAP. We've got to get that going to stay in front of everything that's going to be coming down the road as a result of, his corruption and his power and tyranny. And then he says they also need more people to join the network and help out, the people that are being exploited by the Empire. And that's when Jar Jar convinces Beq that he's the one, that Beq needs to be the person that goes out and looks for all of these people. So this goes back to what you were saying earlier with the Kenobi series, right? They're going around and trying to create these, safe havens and areas for safe houses and not safe havens. Well, I guess they're safe havens, but safe houses and really pull in people that are being repressed and people that are pivotal to the rise of the rebellion, although it's not really called that at this time. And of course, Beq agrees, right? He says, hey, you know what? If you want me to do that, I definitely would do that. But under one condition, the caveat being that he gets to fly around in the duck. And that's how it ends. And then they have a good chuckle about that. And they shake hands and he says, you said got a deal. And I have it cut off, but at the very bottom, it says the beginning, which is, again, this is a one shot. It essentially just means it's the beginning of everything, right? It feels like every time we get new Star Wars media around this era, it feels like, oh, this is where it all starts. Oh, no, this is where it all starts. And now this goes all the way back. The whole rebellion really kind of goes back now here to this moment rather than like some of the stuff in Andor. So, or even some of the stuff that was happening in Star Wars Rebels. But yeah, that's the comic. Let's talk about kind of our what we thought about it. I know you've said a lot already, but what else do you want to say about the comic? And then really takeaways, like what did we learn from it? And like, is this a comic that you would recommend and who would you recommend it to?
So what I thought this comic was a great comic. Keep in mind, I'm not an avid reader of Star Wars comics. I'll pick up, if I hear an issue is popular, I'll pick it up or catch it digitally and read it then. But, this is the first one that I just kind of read, obviously because we were going to discuss it tonight, but I'm glad I did because I think this comic, we talked about a lot of the strong points of this comic, of how it ties into the visual media storylines of Star Wars stories that we've seen already, how the dialogue, how it's written, how, seeing these characters, in, flesh and blood is the best way I could describe it, and seeing them speak and seeing them move and seeing their facial reactions and whatnot. They captured all of that with this comic. Now, from Jar Jar to Kelleran Beq to Palpatine to even Rick Ollie, because Rick was very stoic and stiff, and he was in the comic, he was very stoic and stiff. They captured all of that perfectly. And I would recommend anyone who's a Star Wars fan, definitely Jar Jar fans would need to pick this up and read it. The reason why, and the reason why I recommend it is, yes, we talked about all the strong points of the writing and how it ties into other stories, but we saw it in a panel here where he's like, he needs to start the network now. And what this leads to me, I don't know how this story is going to continue, because again, like you said, it's a one shot. So technically this is it. But what it sounds like is that this storyline could lead to the redemption of Jar Jar in the Star Wars storyline, because, he feels bad. And I'm sure by the end of Revenge of the Sith, he feels even worse, being the vote that granted Palpatine the emergency powers. It sounds like this story is going to a place where he kicks off a resistance and kind of redeems himself for giving that vote. That's what I see happening. So for that reason, I recommend that people read it.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like my takeaway is that this is a redemption story. Like, sure, he's going to do great things, and there's going to be more that comes as a result of the work that he's doing here to build the network, to build the fractal radio system, to have people like Kelleran Beq working with him to keep their eyes and ears abreast of what's happening with all the wrongdoings of the Empire. Like all of that's going to continue to happen, and there's, I'm sure, many successful stories that are going to come as a result. But I love the fact that they've recontextualized what Jar Jar Binks means in Star Wars. Like he is kind of one of the people that started the rebellion, right? And started the resistance, if you will, even later down the road. And so from that perspective, like, yeah, it does feel like he got a redemption story. And that's why, to kind of bring back to what I said earlier, when we were talking about the Aftermath, how he goes from this now to what we see in Aftermath, if that truly stays canonical, I'm really shocked that they would even go there at this point. And it feels like that's probably just going to get written off. Like it feels like you can't give him this and then have him become a street performer down the road, you know?
Unless that's a sacrifice he has to make.
Oh, I can see something like that.
See, that's the thing.
Or he turns to the dark side and actually becomes Darth Jar Jar.
Darth Jar Jar, and then he's redeemed, but for the stuff he did as Darth Jar Jar, he's sentenced to a life of being a clown.
Yeah.
No, right. I think, because here's the thing. I there have been things that have been retconned in the Star Wars universe, although I think they really, 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 really have to have a good reason to do that.
And they try not to. Yeah. I mean, they go through hurdles to try not to do that. But
exactly. But if he goes on and does heroic things in this particular storyline, you know, as far as the creation of the, you know, the network, it could be that, yeah, he makes a sacrifice, or he does something to essentially hide in plain sight, because, you know, he could be a target, right? Yeah. And that's what he does, is he becomes a street performer, either to sacrifice his position for the greater good, or to hide in plain sight from the empire that is hunting him. So it's a lot of questions, even though, you know, I know in Aftermath, it's, you know, after Return of the Jedi and whatnot, but I guess, you know, if you've fallen into that life of being reclusive, of being a street performer, you know, and you've done it for so long, you're not going to hop right back into the thick of things, you know. But I'm interested to see where they go, considering that we know what happens at the end of Aftermath, and considering the heroic things that he's lined up to do because of this comic.
Feels disjointed now. Mm-hmm. It seems almost out of character. And so it feels like if they are going to keep these two tied together, there's going to have to be some big changes, or some big sweeping events that kind of lead to all that. But in general, like, and here's what I would say also, like, should you buy this comic? Yeah, I think this is like, I don't know that we recommend a lot of comics, quite honestly. And that's not to say that we don't like the comics. I mean, we've done plenty of comics on this show, or one of the few shows that actually brings comic content out there, or puts it out there. But this is one of the ones where I feel like, yeah, I would definitely recommend you pick this up and read it, but own it. It is historical. Like, so many times we get Star Wars comics, and it's not specific to Star Wars. It happens in Marvel. It happens with DC, Dark Horse, Image, you name it. It always happens, right? But you go out, you spend your $6. Oh my God, $6 now. $4 or $5, $6, whatever it is, on comics to buy an issue. You get home, you read it, and you're like, man, I didn't like it. Like, there was nothing significant about it. Like, they didn't have any weight. There weren't, this comic is quite the opposite. There's a lot of connected tissue here, right? It connects to a lot of different things across multiple timelines. And even though it's a one-shot comic, it is heavy in terms of what they're trying to do, what they explain here. You think about, like, and this is the extreme, I know, but it is a good example. They did the Biggs and Porkins comic. Right. And I get that comic was supposed to be funny, but it's one of those comics that is an absolute throwaway comic, in my opinion. I mean, I get there are people out there that like those characters, but I mean, they went to the beach and they made sandcastles and did stuff. And it's like, you know, this could have easily, and all I'm saying is that this could have easily been just a throwaway issue, right? Let's give Jar Jar his flowers. Let's put him on the front of an image. Let's show Kelleran Beq. Let's, I don't know. And this is not what I think is happening, but, you know, if you really want to take it to extremes, let's placate Ahmed best, and let's let him be a writer on this comic. And that's not at all what happened here. No, like, they gave him an opportunity to tell a very significant, poignant story that has real life like implications and impacts on the Star Wars universe. And they did it in a comic, which is kind of crazy, because it just really doesn't happen outside of, like, the Charles Soule stuff and some of the stuff that Kevin Scott's written, and some of the more recent stuff that here and there. A lot of what we see even in these series, like Poe Dameron and Afra and stuff, they're like really cool, but they live in a bubble. They don't really cross into the prequel, sequel, and/or all these other series. And so this one does, and that's what's really significant about it, and why I would say, yeah, if you want to pick up anything, this is a great comic to pick up, and I would love to see them pick this up somewhere else. Like I'd be down for a series, right, where it's serialized, where every month we get to go on this adventure of Kelleran Beq and where he's going and the things that he's seeing, and how Jar Jar is working behind the scenes and feeding him information and vice versa, and how the network works. I mean, this could be that kind of starting point to explain a lot of what we saw with in Kenobi. And maybe I'm just being selfish because I do feel like I need more Quinlan Vos. And so maybe it's just an opportunity and an excuse to get more Quinlan Vos stories, but you could bring him into all of this, right? Yeah. And you can make it this whole ongoing series of what this was like leading up to the events of, the rebellion starting, of course. So,
yeah. And Quinlan was flat out mentioned in Kenobi. So
yeah, I mean, his name was right on the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. He would make sense if this spans over years and years. Well, here's what I could say about this being a one shot. Never assume that this is going to be the only comic that we get. Cause just like everything in the entertainment fields, if it's popular, the powers that be are going to want to give more so that they can get more of our money. And a good example of this, and it's not a Star Wars property, but it's the DC Ultimate Universe. Each character was supposed to only have one comic in the Ultimate Universe, and now it's a whole era of comics. And it was just supposed to be a one shot for each character, and now it's a whole universe. So because it was so popular, right? It moved books, and if it happens with this, I would guarantee, I don't want to guarantee, but there would be a good chance that we would get an issue 2 in this series.
Yeah, it makes a good case, and maybe we leave it on this, but keep in mind, the comics, we of course spoiled everything and broke it down because it was just really good and we wanted to talk about it, right? Sell it, if you will. We don't get anything for this, of course, but I would say that the only way this is gonna, if you like what you got in this comic, or you like the theories that we came up with, which I think are very plausible, you got to go out and buy the comic, right? That's the only way they're going to come back is if they see this go into a second and third printing, then that's a good signal that, hey, there's interest here. There's something more that we can tap into. But otherwise, if you don't buy the comic, whether it's physical or digital, it could just die on the vine and we don't ever get anything more for.
Exactly.
So please, go pick this up. Like it's definitely a recommendation. It's not a huge investment, and it's kind of historical to have something like this, given all the other stuff that's going on. I think it's a great comic. So good job to Ahmed, Guggenheim, all the artists and the storyline that they gave us. Cause again, it could have easily been just a throwaway comic that, no one ever talked about after this week. And that's not going to be the case with this one.
Yeah. And I mean, we have the digital copy, but I'm going to go pick up a copy because I want one of the alternate covers. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, yeah, if you can, yeah. Again, we did spoil the thing for you, so you understand all the high points. But in my opinion, when we talk like this and we give like points and stuff, yeah, there are spoilers, but there's nothing like watching a TV show from beginning to end, or watching a movie from beginning to end, or reading a comic or a book from beginning to end. Even though you kind of already know what happens, there's still little details that can surprise you. So right. I would advise everyone, if you liked what we talked about tonight, go pick up the comic, read it for yourself. I guarantee you're going to have a better time reading the comic than you would just taking the high points from us and then kind of leaving it be. So yeah, go pick up the comic, support this particular storyline, because I believe it deserves to live on. And there's a lot of story to tell with this particular story. And I think Star Wars fans deserve it. And again, like Albert said, the only way we're going to get that is if we vote with our dollars and go buy this comic. Yeah.
Yep. So, so thank you guys for those of you, the writers and the artists. And again, thanks to Marvel for allowing us to kind of preview this. Again, this is, we're recording this on February 11th. So the comic just released today. You can go pick it up digitally or go pick it up at your favorite comic book store. It's out there on stands now. So we'll end the show there. I want to say thank you to everyone that joined us tonight on the live stream. So it was Alex, One Up versus CPU. Riley made it. Hello, Riley. Thank you for being here. And then we also had Music Train, My Star Wars guys, both pop in here, and Rita Reborn. Sorry, all three of them kind of popped in a little bit later. So thank you all for joining us. I know there was other people out there. I was actually somewhere else, and someone said, "Hey, I tune into your live streams every week, and I just don't ever say anything, but I'm there. Don't worry." So you know who you are. It's Paul's Collectibles. Paul, thank you so much for watching. If you're here tonight, he just doesn't like to make his presence known or whatever. So. We know there are other people out there, so thank you guys for tuning in and certainly for the download. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button on this. And if you guys have any questions, you want to provide feedback, you can do so down in the comics. And then the last thing I'll plug is we haven't had an iTunes review in some time. It's really not that important, but we're still trying to dig out of a hole when we had a lot of negative comments come in from a few years back when The Last Jedi came out and we liked it and people were just sending us no-star reviews and that sort of thing. So they kind of buried us with that. So if you've not had a chance to go drop an iTunes review, please, it actually helps to kind of bring up the numbers. So thank you for doing that if you can. Not required, but it would certainly be appreciated. Okay, Chris, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No final thoughts. It's just that it's a great comic and go pick it up.
Yep. Okay, guys, thanks so much. And for Patreon members, we will see you guys back here on Sunday.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.